So, welcome back to Behind the Screen. This is something I've been meaning to do for a while and have just been forgetting to do for whatever reason. But today I'm going to be showing you how I speak about writing story beats for my campaign rather than like a railroaded plot or a guided plot. And I've never actually shown you the story beats. So apart from one video, one stream, which was at this point 13 weeks ago. So obviously that's maybe even 14 weeks ago. Can't remember. Obviously that was a while ago, and it's something I've always talked about and I've never actually shown you. So I thought today was the perfect time to show you. One, because I can stream for a bit longer than usual because we're not actually playing Dungeons and Dragons today. The venue we use is closed, so we're just playing tomorrow instead. And two, because it's something I need to get done and figured this was a great place to do it. Depending how long this takes for me to run out of ideas or for you guys to get bored, might just go back to doing the in-gun stuff, which is what it is if we do get there. But first, obviously, the recap. So last week, we did actually manage to play, which was good. And the players were all dismayed at the fact that Javik had summoned a hag to assist him in battle. Their dismay turned to joy when the hag shot him in the back with a lightning bolt and killed him for displeasing their master. Players didn't really question the terms of the hag's oath, so I didn't have to explain. It was something I thought would be cool and kind of counteract their expectations of a knockdown fight to the death. Stuff like this is always very risky because you're taking agency from the player's hands, but I thought it served a good story purpose. And after Javik was killed, the party, all except Sorcerer Warlock, failed their wisdom saves to see what happened next. So time stopped for everyone but the Warlock, who his body was frozen, but he could still see and perceive things. He saw a figure they've only previously really seen in the background step through a portal and take Javik's face for failing him for the last time. And then noticed the party and introduce himself as Tharn Sunchild, who is the big bad, and give them the option of essentially swear an oath not to interfere with his plans, or he'd kill them there and then. The party obviously reacted in the manner you'd expect with her. That's not really a choice at all, but he's an archfey, and they don't care about fair choice. It's still a choice, and a few of them said yes, and kind of felt the bonds of fate settle on them. A few of them said no. He allowed the party Warlock Paladin to kind of duck the issue because they're already sworn in service to another being, and he recognized that. And so three of them, Monk, Sorcerer, Rogue, Warlock, and Fighter, in brackets Eldritch Knight, decided that they wouldn't accept the terms of this agreement and essentially fought Tharn Sunchild using the Lord of the Cinderhall stat block we created a few weeks ago. And it progressed about as well as you'd expect. They quickly realized they were outmatched. The monk knew that he was going to be outmatched anyway and just kind of accepted the fate that was befalling him and was the first one down. As the monk fell, the fighter kind of retracted their previous negative and swore this oath, and time stopped for them. And I should point out, all of this happened above ground, with Javik's death and with the fake choice. Thorn undid his magic, and they kind of rose to the surface and saw that the mansion was gone and the sky was different, and life had returned and everything was as it should have been, sort of. It's kind of transitioning back from Feywild adjacent to Prime Material. And as the fighter said, swore the oath, and there's the monk lay on the ground, kind of frozen in time, but definitely in a dying state. The party rogue warlock, contacted his patron and asked for help, and I got him to roll percentile as if doing the I think it's called Divine Intervention, the cleric ability, the cleric 10th level cleric feature, where you can, if you get below your level, your god intervenes in some way. He failed, as I expected he would, and but someone did hear his call for help and did respond. Thorn's sister, Alara, who appeared as like a extremely pale-skinned woman, ice blue eyes, hair of whitest snow, who basically just flicked her hand and froze Thorn in place, summoned a portal, and another familiar figure, who the party now know to be a banshee, wearing a kind of rusty dented plate armor and ragged white robes, bowed deeply to Alara and kind of pulled Thorn back through. Thorn, when she first appeared, seemed very scared of her, and the party were unsure as to why, and then she turned to the rogue warlock, who was the only one really conscious, who was the only one who could really act at this point, and demanded it from him. Now, it just so happened that the character in the fiction that the players created was tricked into his agreement with his patron, and he also happened to be in possession of this Fey lady's heart, which the party had found hidden in a statue a few sessions previously, and he realized that this is what she meant and gave it to her. And she put her heart back in her chest and was revealed to be a dryad. And she explained that a member of the party knew about her, and Stormchaser remembered that he'd been told about someone who knows a lot about binding magics like the Fey would, being the guest of one of the lords of one of the 12. So they realized that this was the Lady Alara, and she explained a bit about how Thorn wanted to kill her and the sitter was protecting her. She was currently still too weak to do anything much, but she'd help in any way. And as a reward for giving her heart back, she bestowed her favor upon the rogue warlock, and essentially he went from being a fiend patron to a Fey patron warlock, which did change the player's plans a little bit. But I gave him the choice of he could just take the Fey race type, because he's human, so he'd become Fey with some like Fey ancestry stuff, or change patron. I wouldn't have offered it to any other player, just so happened he had the heart. And it took a while to think about it, and came back with he wanted to change his patron. He thought that was a good move for the character. So he's changed patron. That was the point when they all leveled up, functionally speaking. They haven't technically finished the quest, but it was the story beat that I was going for. And they also found Javik's actual family, who his wife explained that he had performed this ritual with mirrors, and they'd been pushed through the mirror and kind of seen their mirror selves appear, and they were the people in the actual house. So the party are now escorting what remains of the Trentums. It was Branta, Elora, and Jinnit back to Scour and to their holding, where they'll find that they've been robbed of all their art, and there are homeless people living in their attic. But that's a problem for another day. And that was where we ended. They'd got back to a ruined cottage that they'd sort of found while they were in this Feywild adjacent state. amid an orchard and rested, and we wrapped up with the party monk / sorcerer while in this like half asleep trance state, taking the cleric's sword, which for the cleric is just a long sword, but because it's a furbolg, it's basically almost a great sword for everyone else apart from the party gnome, obviously, who just can't wield it. And fighting unseen opponents, but like his fur was blowing in an unseen breeze, and there was sand being kicked onto his robes as if from the movements of his feet, where there is not sand on the ground. And we finished the session with him being awoken and saying, "I think I need to go home," which is great for me because there's a storyline there, as there is a storyline everywhere. But the storyline, which I'll scroll down in a moment to show you, which I've got planned for his home, ties into both his and the cleric's backstories. So it will give the cleric a reason to stay with the party beyond just fate kind of guiding him that way, because he rather than following a deity, he follows a philosophy, and kind of follows the wind and lets it guide him where he's needed. So that's cool. And that's where we're at, so I will amend the recap accordingly. And then we will get started with the actual stream. I will also say that I am expecting a parcel at some point. It may arrive while I'm streaming. It may arrive after I finish streaming. I don't know. Just something to be aware of. Right, so recap. The heroes witnessed the death of Javik Trentum. Mostly swore oaths to a Fey Lord. Oh, no. Mostly should be in parentheses, nothing else in that sentence. Mostly swore oaths to a Fey Lord. Aided a Fey Lady. These need capitals. I don't know why I'm looking at the preview, because that's not what the cursor is. Aided a Fey Lady. Oxford comma. And began escorting the Trentums home. Heroes witnessed the death of Javik Trentum, mostly swore oaths to a Fey Lord, aided a Fey Lady, and began escorting the Trentums home. Interesting. Can I extend that text box a little bit? Just to avoid there we go. That works. So that's where we are up to. We're going to grab another drink and then we'll get into the actual meat of the stream proper. Hello, Kiwi folk. I trust that your succulent fruit bird human flesh is doing well on this fine, unintentionally macabre day, now that I say that sentence out loud. Anyway, so, storyline, campaign planning. So I have, as I've mentioned that I write story beats rather than storylines a lot. I've never actually written most of them down. They just kind of exist nebulously in my head until I need them. But I figured it's probably a good idea to have them written down somewhere so that I know, now that the players are entering a more sandbox stage of the campaign, so I know roughly what's going to happen, or what might happen, I should say. And obviously, I've also mentioned that I keep things vague enough that I can just slot them in wherever is appropriate, apart from where it is necessary that they are tied to specific locations, people, or events. So with that being said, I have, I believe, mentioned that the big bad is called Thorn Sunchild. Yes, I did last week, I think that was. And villain creation and stuff, and explained that it's helpful to have an idea of their plot, of their scheme, so to speak, to guide campaign play. And I will also say, before getting down into the nitty-gritty, this method works for me. It may not work for you. It may not work for your players. There's no judgment. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. Do whatever works best for you. This isn't all the information I have. For example, I still need to add the subplot, like the sub-scheme to this document, which I'll probably do in a moment. But, so the overarching scheme of the campaign, which you'll note from the stream title and from the, if you look at the top left, the Google Drive folder is called Waking the Gods. That's the campaign title. The general theme I'm exploring is the quote-unquote humanity, because obviously humans are, and other species, and its relation to deities. In this world, the gods are more just incredibly powerful beings. So Thorn Sunchild was posing as a god, for example. And so the whole point is that the gods have been imprisoned or are asleep or are absent in some way. And the campaign is about reconnecting the world to the gods in preparation for events to come. Which is really ambitious because it's planned as the first part of a 3-campaign story, and I don't know if we'll ever reach campaign 2, let alone campaign 3. And certainly if we reach campaign 3, it probably won't be 5th edition we're playing because of the timescales involved. But that is by the by. So as I say, the theme I'm exploring is sapient life and its relation to the divine, because that I find interesting, and I wanted a very high fantasy feel to the campaign, with the gods being involved in some way, and kind of by the end of it, the player characters will be mythic heroes. They'll be writing, like, they'll have legends about them that will echo down through the other through other games set in this world. So that's kind of the whole point of the campaign. But how am I going about that? I'm giving them the basest motivation ever to be heroes in a way, and that they're just going to save a city at the end of the day. I like stories about fairies, and the very fact that I do this for a living, I play Dungeons and Dragons, and obviously I play a lot of story games on stream, should tell you that I like stories and melodrama. So I just embraced the melodrama of fairies and fairy tales, and kind of asked the question, what is the most extra thing that a fairy would do? And I got down to, it would destroy the world to kill its rival. So you'll note that the overarching scheme, Thorn Sunchild, Lord of the Cinderhall, wishes to kill his sister, Alora Moontouched, who is currently being protected by the city of Scour. That was my starting point, and then I broke that down into like 3 rough like campaign tiers in a way to mark the phases of the campaign. So there's a scheme in Act 1, there's a scheme in Act 2, and then there's a scheme that will culminate with the end of Act 3. And each one will kind of, in theory, guide the story experience that we have at the table. So Act 1, the scheme taking part there was just bring the city down from the inside using a corrupt human noble. And this was Javik Trentham. With his death at the end of 7th level, I think, they've finished Act 1. Act 1 was very much a kind of a low-power, low-impact game, just getting them used to the world. They'd never played... none of them had played D&D before, 2 years ago when we started. It was very much a traditional, you're given an objective by an NPC, you go and do the objective, you return, you get another objective, etc., etc. And that worked as a setup. It got them to work together. It gave them a reason to be together, and to set the heroes on their hero's journey. But now they've done that, so that beats down. They've is there a strike through option? I can't bother to find out. They've done that. That has been thwarted. So the next step in Tharn's plan: invade Scour and raze it to the ground. How's he going to do that? He's going to unite the local orc hordes. He's going to unite the local goblin tribes. He's going to ally with the giants, and then he's going to invade. Now, those are 4 steps in the plan. I'm not expecting the players to encounter each and every step of those plans, because that would be very much a reactive story. They want to begin being dictated where to go, and that's not the feeling of the campaign now. They know the game, like the rules. They have a good understanding of their characters and what their characters can do and how their characters would react. And it's time that they engage fully with the game and with the story that we're telling. So I'm giving them the option of where to go. For the rest of the last 13 levels of gameplay, or 12 levels, depending on how you count level progression, I guess. But these are the 4 steps that Tharn will undertake to complete his plan. I'm expecting / hoping that they will at least prevent the invasion somehow. And should they prevent the invasion, he moves on to the 3rd section in that main beat. He will summon the Wild Hunt. This, I envisage as being like levels 15 to 20, level 16 to 20, like high level play, where extremely powerful fey creatures come into existence, and the more kind of high stakes gameplay, where the players, probably not all, but some of them have kind of come into their own mythic identity by this point. And that might start happening quite soon, as you'll see when I scroll down. But definitely kind of give them the impetus to embrace their destinies and become who they are supposed to be. Because again, I want this high fantasy feel to it, where they are not necessarily the chosen ones, because there aren't such things in this world, but people who have the potential to be more than mortal in a way. So they could almost like demigods. So I think I've mentioned it before, but the characters, are imbued with fragments of divine power from a patron deity, and I do need to change that. This is something I wanted to discuss on stream today for one of the characters. But it's kind of the idea that the gods have scattered their essence throughout time and space, in the hopes that one fragment of it will return and give them enough strength to free themselves or awaken or what have you. And hopefully the summoning of the Wild Hunt, which I'll work out like omens and other events to point the players towards the fact that they need to embrace their destinies to claim this power to stop the Wild Hunt appearing. Because if they don't, then it's going to be summoned and it's going to destroy. Well, it's going to kill Alara for one, because she'll be the target, but it will probably destroy like most things in reality, because it's unchecked fairies hunting. And depending on the success of this, the ritual itself, even if it doesn't succeed, it's going to still weaken the fabric of reality and lead into the rest of the 3 campaign story. That's by the by. And then the actual ritual components, you'll see are broken down further into 4 things that he's got to get to perform this ritual, and that's something I don't need to work out now. Although broken word of a hero will be as soon as one of the players breaks their oath to not interfere in his plans, because one of them worded it where it was like, "I will not knowingly interfere in any of your plans," and that's fine, because he was the only one that worded it that way. So as soon as anyone he worded it. It was a very good loophole that essentially means that he's covered in most circumstances, knowingly or unknowingly. Sorry, I misspoke. But he was the only one that did. The other players just said yes. So when they unknowingly meddle in a plan, that's their word broken, and that's that item checked off. So that's fine. That's by and by. That's by the by. So those are the main beats of the story. Kind of conveying the general feel that I want for that act of the story to take. If you have any questions about anything, please do not be afraid to ask, by the way. And then other than that, because, as I say, I'm letting the players decide where to go, it's going to be story beats broken up in this instance by geography. There are three main locations on the continent that they're on. The Monarchy of Enduring Sages in the south, which is where they're based. It's kind of your cosmopolitan, almost neo-feudal civilization, people of all races, and a variety of kind of environmental areas and regions, from the Ashlands, which is extremely fertile soil, but volcanic and very dangerous to live in because of all the monsters. So it's fortified cities and villages. And you've got Scour, where the player party started, which is just a mega city and doesn't have that many dependent villages nearby. The Heartlands are overrun by the undead, but that's kind of mountainous and heavily forested. And then I can't remember what I called the region to the west. I think it's the Widowlands, maybe, where there's the monarchy, where the Sheermouth, the nominal capital of the monarchy, is, as well as Widowton, the main link to the nearest continent to the west. And that's more of a pastoral, more typical medieval fantasy area. And then there is the Ozark Desert, which is what it sounds like. It's a desert. It's where most of the kind of the dwarves live. On the continent, there is a huge crevasse roughly in the center of it, where the dwarven capital is, Mordane's Vigil. But there are surface folk dwelling cities and settlements, mostly built above dwarf holds where the water is. But like there's Vornal's Refuge, which I updated on my website on Friday. That's a surface folk settlement on the coast, for example. And that's very much a place where the environment is a threat as well as the wildlife. There are like tribes of goblins that live there, and lizard folk, but kind of the vast majority of wildlife in the Ozark Desert is predatory, and very much used to a low water situation. And then the Starspire Forest, which is your typical primeval forest. The elves live there. They build treetop cities to avoid the forest floor, where the monsters live, for want of a better word. There are kind of like humans and other species in the Starspire Forest. They generally build their cities below, like at the foot of the trees the elves live in. And then there are also like monasteries and stuff scattered throughout. Oh, that'll be my package. Sorry about that. I had to check that everything I'd ordered arrived properly. Just some investments in the streaming business, and hopefully soon I can have a proper desk and I'll be streaming in my dining room. We just need to sort out the spare bedroom and turn it into an office space. Anyway, yes, where was I? Geography. So those are the three main geographical areas, and each one obviously is going to have stuff going on in it. And I wanted, because I do believe firmly in collaborative storytelling and having the spotlight on the player characters and their actions rather than NPCs. How best to put this? I guess my focus when writing story beats is how I can tie it back to a character without it seeming too contrived. And I kind of went through this, as I say, like 14 weeks ago at this point, with the 10th of these streams with the storyline design stuff with the Eldritch Knight, the half-orc urchin. And you'll see here we've got in the Monarch of Enduring Sages, an orc shaman acting as Tharn's second in command is raising more forces, so it ties in with this story beat. And that's tied in with Luth because one, it's a half orc, one, it's not full orc, so it's kind of confronting that side of his heritage. But also that orc shaman knows the truth about Storm Herald, which is the kind of like second stage of a weapon that originally was intended for Luth, but the cleric seems to have taken it, thus leaving the Eldritch Knight without a magical weapon once more. So obviously I might have to change that to represent it being a story beat for Urin, but again, maybe not, because it's still a confrontation of racial heritage and what it means to be a half-orc or an orc in this world. So that seemed fine because, you know, orc hordes are a big part of this storyline, and Luth is a half-orc. So there's kind of a question of identity there in that story beat that I'm interested in exploring, and I hope that the player wants to explore. And then the second story beat for Luth you can see is in the Ozark Desert, where there's a trading enclave suffering from a strange illness. There's a local werebear guardian trying to help but can't deal with the unquiet dead because it's not equipped to do so. One of Scour's spies, who is someone that Luth knows from growing up on the streets, has dug up an artifact or has killed someone to keep an artifact secret, which has made the dead in that area unquiet. And the werebear also lives in a temple to a forgotten storm god, where Stormcaller, which is Javik's sword, in air quotes, sword, Javik's weapon, because it can change, can be sacrificed to the storm god to gain Storm Herald, which is the axe. And then I haven't really thought of a story beat to tie it to yet, apart from just the main storyline. But one of the kind of supports to the Cinder Hall, and Tharn's used his magic to kind of create a pocket dimension in the Ashlands in a swamp where the Cinder Hall can reside. And one of the roof supports is a storm giant that he's captured and has tortured. And if they go there with Storm Herald, it will obviously recognize its axe, and in exchange for its freedom will grant the +3 magic weapon of whatever storm motif I can think of. So that's kind of like a mini storyline for the weapon in itself. But that's focused on Luth again because it's kind of like this primal savage being, in traditional understanding, trying to help civilization, and also the player wants wants to become a werebear. So, there's that. But you'll note that both of these are vague enough that they could technically apply anywhere until they could be anywhere that the players want to explore. If, for example, they ignore something in one of the other locations, and I feel like they could do more there, or that there's not really enough time spent there exploring the ideas of that area, I could just take that story beat and slide it in where relevant. So keep them vague. These are definitely vague on purpose. And then the Star Spire Forest is an example of a specific event. Technically, it could be anywhere. But because I want to tie it into Burning Stormchaser and Urin Silverhand's backstories, so Burning Stormchaser is the party monk and comes from the Starspire Forest, was raised in a monastery there, the Dawn Rivers Monastery, who worship a god of light, or kind of not worship, but encourage observance of god of light. And their Sun Soul monks, so they're obviously kind of down that path of teachings and beliefs. And in Urin's backstory, the place he came from, the place the Furbolgs came from, I should say, was destroyed by a dragon, or I think it was a dragon. And so he took that idea from just a place called the Sundered Cliffs I'd previously written about. And so I've tied them together so that if they go to the Sundered Cliffs, the dragon, or Dracolich now, will be present and they will have to defeat it. And when they defeat it, they will be able to gain entry to kind of this stronghold where the archivist, one of the necromancers I've mentioned previously, is conducting their research using power taken from a Kirin. I'm probably butchering that name. Which is a celestial being. Now, as a celestial being, it does have special powers. And I decided that this Kirin is kind of in service to Pelor, who is the patron of the monk. Who the monk has a fragment of Pelor's essence. So, freeing the Kirin essentially allows the Kirin to open a portal to Duat, because I'm playing heavily on Ra motifs here, and kind of put them on the solar barge that is Pelor's domain, and set them up in a fight with the Serpent Apophis, who is what is functionally imprisoning Pelor. Neither party can injure the other, nor can neither party escape the other. But with the player's help, Pelor will be freed and will, be able to act in the world once more. Those are the story beats I've got so far. I'm trying to get kind of like 2 story beats for each character, except Burning Stormchaser, who's already had a huge one. But that's obviously up for debate, because with 6 characters, I think so. Yeah, with 6 player characters, if I give each a story beat because I use story beats as level progression, that's 12 levels of progression right there. Yeah, I can tie them together sometimes, but I like having the spotlight on a character as well, just so it feels more personal. So that's where I am. As I say, I'd like 2 per character. Sorry. Luth is functionally taken care of. I don't need one for the gnome warlock, warlock paladin, the gnome, because each of the necromancers, when they are killed, will be freeing the Raven Queen, his patron, using the Unearthed Arcana rules for Pact of the Raven Queen. So that's fine. So that's 2 fewer. So that automatically makes it 10, and they've already done 7. So that gives us 17, which is a good amount to have 3 levels leeway depending on how the players go about their self-directed kind of experience. Sorry, just want to check something. Oh, that's the wrong window. That's all grand. And just reply to this. Right, there we go. Okay, so where was I? Yes, so story beats. So we don't need any for Razric the Gnome. So we've got. Actually, I'll just type this down at the bottom, I guess. Needed beats. So we need one for Urin times 1, Corvo times 2, Apollo times 2. I think that's it, actually. Oh, Storm Chaser times 1. Four characters. Luth's got 2 already. Razric's is the quote-unquote kind of main sub-story, or functionally speaking, it is the main storyline. It's just not the the climactic storyline, in a way. Okay, so I think I want Burning Storm Chaser's other storyline to be in the Starspire Forest because other story beat, sorry, because that's a personal location to him. It's where he grew up. It's where he feels he was exiled from, in a way. Oh, in a way. It's where he feels exiled from. So I'll make a note of that right there. Starspire Forest. Much like with Urin, but I know what I think I want to do with that. So I want Urin's to be in the Ozark Desert, which leaves Corvo and Apollo. Now, Corvo's the one that's had the patron change from Fiend to Fae. So, I guess it would make sense to have something in the Starspire Forest being the kind of center of Fae activity on this world, where the walls of the worlds are thin. Everything up to this point has taken place in the Enduring Sages. But also we do need to have the confrontation at the Cinder Hall as a possible story beat. So that's possible, but that's more of a party story beat than anything else. It could possibly be included with the Invade the City stuff, but that's that's a by the by. Today it's about player specific, character specific story beats. Well, we'll go with the wrong one for Urin done off the bat because I know what I want to do with that. So, a false dwarf is claiming to be an capital A avatar. So in this world, because the gods are trapped. There's a periodic power struggle called the Cataclysm between the quote unquote gods and avatars who have fragments of power, but choose to pursue they choose to pursue those fragments to godhood themselves rather than seeking out the gods because they don't have the impetus to do so. So dwarf is going to be an avatar. Or named Mordine is claiming to be an avatar. And this is Urin's storyline. Technically, this is both Urin and Luth, because their essence is from the same god, Tempus. But it's going to be more of an Urin storyline in that people need helping, potentially. And I'm happy to change these story beats around anyway. So a dwarf named Mordine is going to be an avatar. Mordine's vigil is under martial law. Oops. Brindith, who is an ex-player character, is fomenting rebellion. PCs can help / hinder, depending on who they decide is in the right in this place, and whether Mordine is actually an avatar or whether he is just a dictator, a tyrant with an iron fist. But he has an item that the players need to gain access to the god that they need to free. Mordine has the Hammer of the Everforge. So Tempus is trapped in a realm called the Everforge. It's his personal domain. He is trapped in the sense that it was sealed away. He's not unconscious. He's not ill or anything. He's simply unable to leave his domain. Hammer of the Everforge functions as one part of the key, and something Brindith has functions as the second part of the key. It'll be up to me to kind of figure out how to reconcile those two things with each other. But that's a future problem for future Ryan, because past Ryan is a scumbag. Yeah, my name's Ryan, if you don't know. Hi. It's on Twitter, so I don't mind sharing that information. Yes, so Mordine has the Hammer of the Everforge, part of the key to the Everforge. So how the players get that off of him is entirely up to them. When used correctly, frees Tempest. Originally, because I was planning all these kind of ideas when Brindith was in the party, when the party was smaller, and before I'd really grown as a GM. Originally, I kind of envisaged a single combat scenario for between Brindith and Mordine for ownership of the hammer. But how that will play out now is up to the players. They could certainly go for single combat. They could try and steal it. Obviously, if they successfully foment rebellion, then they can just claim it as the kind of spoils of victory. So that's all that sorted. Incidentally, when people pop into chat, say hi, and then abruptly leave, I always worried that something's gone wrong. I just worry about people, humanity in general, I guess. But that's by the by. So that's one for Urin. So that can be deleted as appropriate. So that's 2. Okay. I want a roughly even spread across the 3 areas. I'm not saying that I expect the players to go to an area, do everything in the area, and then leave and never come back. It might be that they do something, go to investigate something else and come back, maybe. I just want stuff for them to do that is tangentially related to them in some way. So, Storm Chase is obviously going to have something else in the Star Spy Forest. I have a nebulous idea about that. I don't know how much the player's okay with me sharing on stream, so I don't know if I'll be really nailing that down today, but it relates to family and kind of prophecy in a way, so I don't know about that. But Apollo. Now, Apollo I had a cool idea for. So, my idea for Apollo was essentially his power comes from a god I haven't decided upon yet, but or a godlike being, which in this instance, it was that was it. That was my idea for Apollo. So Apollo, he is a shadow sorcerer, and he gets his shadow magic from a shadow dragon scale in his chest, and his patron is the shadow dragon, even though he's a hexblade warlock, and that works out fine for me. And my idea was that this dragon Uranos, player's name, all his characters and backstory are Greek themed, which is great stuff. I know isn't the first bearer of the name Uranos, and there's always one scale out of the world, because part of the claiming of the mantle of the dragon is you are sacrificed on an altar and have a choice to free Tiamat, the mother of all dragons, traditionally evil goddess, free Bahamut, the platinum dragon, often seen as divine protector of justice and law and good, or keep the balance between them by keeping them both imprisoned. I'm going to interpret it and put it to the player at the time that if kind of Bahamut is freed, it will be very much a militaristic regime in a way. It is divine justice, doesn't care about morals, it's absolute. And so this is why Bahamut was imprisoned in the first place. And then depending on who they free, their boon will relate to Tiamat, to Bahamut, or to being a shadow dragon themselves. I just don't know which area would be best to put that in, and I don't know how to get to that stage. So for context, I decided that this sacrificial ritual needs three components. The victim, in this case Apollo, a sacrificial table, which the players found in the Shadowfell, and with no prompting from me whatsoever, the player signified, I did. I interjected as his patron and said, that's mine. So the player duly marked it for collection by the patrons or the servants. And then a knife, a sacrificial blade of some kind, probably made of platinum. The table is made of obsidian, being volcanic glass, so kind of like holding all the elements within it, like Tiamat does. And then I thought it'd be cool to have the balance of a platinum knife as the sacrificial weapon. I just don't know where to put that knife. The Ozark Desert would make the most sense because that's where the dwarves live, and kind of that kind of culture, but I don't know if that's too obvious and on the nose. Let's say everything's happened in the Monarchy of the Enduring Sages so far, and I want Corvo's from Scour, so I want to have at least one of Corvo's story beats here. So I'll just put Corvo, and then we'll revisit that one later. in theory. Whereas Apollo isn't. Although, no, Apollo has to have a story beat here because this is where the necromancer that tortured him as a child lives. So we do need to have Apollo to have a story beat here for kind of personal gratification in a way. I don't know if that's the right phrase. I've got the archivist and the engineer's technically in the Ozark Desert, so I should probably include that somewhere. Confrontation at Cinder Hall, possible Corvo. So, what would it be? I guess it would just be the sculptor's experiments are going awry, and then that will be no, the sculptor's experiments are becoming noticed, and that will be both for Apollo and Corvo, because someone from Corvo's backstory is a pawn of the sculptor. And the sculptor is a necromancer who works with flesh golems, that kind of thing. So maybe they're using the power of this platinum knife to create their minions, creatures, whatever. One of whom is the man who ordered the death of Corvo's wife and child. So, undead in the Heartlands are acting with purpose. Travelers are becoming more and more threatened. The players know that there is something in Gith Dranok tied to the Raven Queen. Hopefully at this point they'll have figured out it's tied to the Necromancer. So it's kind of like Deathwalker, that's what I called them. Deathwalker army marshalling at the fallen city of Gith Dranok. And then a sculptor using a platinum dagger to create undead forces. And then main. Oh wait, no, not hyphen. Subtab. Vance Hallister acting as general. Death Tyrant. That works fine for me. So this is and then this kind of gets onto the Corvo problem with him changing his patron. So originally, no, lift the curtain. So the deities that I had in mind when creating the extra features that the players have access to, Apollo would be either Tiamat or Bahamut, depending on his choice. Burning Stormtrooper was Paylor. I took a traditional D&D real-world mythology approach to deities. So these are deities from different worlds. Luth was Tempus. And then when Urin joined, I decided Urin would also be Tempus. My Tempus is heavily inspired by Ogu Ferun. I think it's Ferun from Voodoo. And in Voodoo, the Loire, the spirits, can take a hot and a cold aspect. So as the god of war, Tempus is in his hot aspect and favours Luth. And as a god of smithcraft, he is in his cold aspect and favours Urin. That was just something I wanted to explore, and it was admittedly an easy way out from having to have another god be imprisoned, but also thought it might be an interesting thing to explore, as I say. So that's the 4 of them. Razrix is the Raven Queen, which, I mean, it's no great leap to see the Morrigan influences there. And other NPCs, another NPC the players have met, who I've written about on my website, is also a warlock who is sworn to the Raven Queen, but Razric is sworn to the Raven Queen in her guise as kind of, in the Morrigan's guise, a kind of a war goddess, because the Morrigan is like a 3-in-1 triple deity, War, Death, and Prophecy, and Elenia, the NPC, is sworn to the Raven Queen as a death goddess. Not that, player who plays Razric knows this. And then Corvo was originally invested with a fragment of Baal's power, the god of murder from the Forgotten Realms. And I don't think that really fits anymore with the direction the character's taking. So he started off as an assassin, which is why I came up with this idea. And then the player, because he was new at the time to D&D, kind of respect as a swashbuckler, and that was fine. I allowed it. The assassin stuff had never really come into play anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. He just realised that at level 3, the assassin wasn't what he wanted to do with the character, so that was fine and dandy. And kind of the swashbuckler I could still sort of fit with Baal as the Lord of Murder, and the whole idea there was that Baal is trapped in a tomb in Elysium, and when the party tracked down Mans Hallister the first time at the culmination of level 5 and killed him, the Corvo, the rogue, touched a floating crystal in the room, which was calling to him, and thereby freed Demogorgon, his patron, because player wanted to multiclass for level 6. And this was my way of introducing the patron. And as part of that, the magic that had been trapping Demogorgon in this crystal, or a fragment of Demogorgon, or whatever, revealed the location of Baal's tomb, but only the warlock saw it, and I think that he's forgotten about it. So I don't mind discarding that entire storyline entirely. It stops me having to figure out a way to get them to Elysium, which is a celestial plane if you don't know, and finding the tomb, going through the tomb and talking to Baal. Sorry, I needed a drink. But it does leave me with the question of what do I do about the Corvo storyline? Because the original one doesn't serve anymore, and I don't want to have him be any less valid or invested, I guess. I don't want Corvo to be on a different level to everyone else, is what I'm trying to say in terms of the mythic overtone of the storyline. My idea, and obviously I don't know how good it is that as like a champion of a fae, of one of the Archfey now, all his shadow powers could be coming from Not Baal, certainly. Let's check the list of purviews. Purviews? That's the wrong game. That is the wrong game entirely. This is from Scion. The domains, sorry, listed in PHP at the end. Because he's not a rogue terribly bothered about killing people, backstabbing people. And obviously Baal is god of murder, so there's that. Doesn't really work. There's Kalemvor, but he's more of death. Lyra, goddess of illusion, doesn't really... Goddess of pain definitely doesn't fit. I mean, Mask is the obvious one as the god of thieves, and he's an ex-thief. I don't know if it's really appropriate. Shah, goddess of darkness and loss. Now that is appropriate. Because the idea I had right up until starting this stream was that his shadow powers would come from the Feywild and like the Unseelie Court and things like that. But that doesn't really answer the question of where they came from originally, because he's only just become aligned with the Fey in a way. Right, so Shah would be in as a Faerunian deity, Sword Coast Adventure Guide. Where's the list of gods? Gods of Faerun. Just check that this is the right book before I go frantically flipping through it. Oh, please do. Beg pardon. Right. Can you not highlight share? There we go. Mistress of Night, the Dark Lady, Our Lady of Loss. Goddess of Night, Secrets, Loss, and Forgetfulness. She represents pains hidden but not forgotten, and vengeance is carefully nurtured away from... Oh, this is perfect. Okay, so... I guess I need to figure out how one would imprison, poison, or otherwise weaken Goddess of Night, Secrets, Loss, and Forgetfulness. Right, so how would that work in this world? I don't want it to be an aspect of the Raven Queen, so I need to stay away from the necromancers again. Because yes, Corvo's story has touched upon them as being kind of the people in control of his nemesis. I don't think that they're a main part of his story. Okay, let's approach from a different angle. So Corvo's wife and child, the deaths thereof ordered by his nemesis. Demogorgon definitely exploited those, and from what has already been established in the game, I believe, this is something I can check, but I think that, you know what, rather than closing these and opening new windows, I'm just going to check the Trello on my phone. I think that it has been established that the necromancers ordered the death of his family, but I don't want to... is it this one? Okay, so it was he who was supposed to die. So I don't think that it makes sense for Shah to have been directly behind it. But if we're talking mythic overtones and symbolism, then perhaps the death of a loved one or something like that always happens to people who are invested with a fragment of Shah's energy, of Shah's essence, sorry. So where would his vengeance take him? He knows that Manshalister is not dead. He knows that he's working for this necromancer. So that's fine. Because I also don't want to get too planar with the game. Because I don't want the players to feel like what Thorn's doing isn't the biggest threat out there. I mean, it isn't by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the focal point of the entire game. And I'm happy to change it if the game goes in that direction. Because flexibility is important. But it's still something that I don't want to trivialize. I do want it to be kind of up there with importance. Okay, so Shah is a twin. She's the twin of the moon. I've already played with mirrors before. Maybe there's an angle there where she's trapped like as a reflection to her sister, or to the moon. It's not a bad idea, actually. And that could easily be an oasis or a lake in the starts by a forest. But then how would that manifest and provide a hook? Well, the obvious answer there would be that the imprisonment is poisoning the land around them, but then kind of you raise the question of why it's just started happening now. Answer, possibly because it's the first time that an essence of Shah has been kind of granted the mythic identity that the party are taking on, possibly. And also with a Sunsoul monk, and with that Sunsoul monk being patronized by Palor, darkness kind of can't exist without light in a way, because it's just the absence of light is not darkness, it's just absence, to my way of thinking anyway, certainly in mythological overtones. So that's an idea. Like the party forming is what's kicking off some of these events, what's triggering some of the gods kind of slowly stirring, making their impact felt on the world once more. So how would the goddess of night, secrets, forgetfulness, and kind of vengeance, loss, poisoning the land around her prison work? I'm not averse to going back to the Shadowfell, actually, for this. One, because Apollo has to go back to the Shadowfell anyway, so it would give it another reason to be there. And two, because the Shadowfell obviously is a plane of loss and death and things like that. So I might add that actually as a separate location. But also thinking maybe like a Mirror idea from Tolkien, where there's a perfectly reflective lake. This is where she's trapped. And it's not just Tolkien's idea. There are other fantasy authors who have dealt with that trope, with that idea, but Shadowfell. I'll include the Feywild as well, because it's not inconceivable that they'll end up there. But then the question becomes, if it's in the Shadowfell, how do the players find out about it? Because they don't really have any contact with that plane other than the brief time they spent there, and they left as soon as they possibly could. Just trying to think. So I definitely do like the idea of her being trapped in a body of water reflecting the moon, to symbolize her sister. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bump the mic. But it would have to be somewhere that the player characters would feasibly hear about it. Could be the Monarchy of Enduring Sages. So I mentioned at the start of the stream-ish that the Ashlands is made up of fortified villages and towns, and someone on stream, I can't remember who, it was so long ago, made the point that if a fortified town or village falls, that knowledge is probably going to spread throughout the surrounding countryside. So if the players end up in that area of the Monarchy of the Enduring Sages, they will definitely hear about something going on. So evocative name. Well, actually, if she's the goddess of forgetfulness, maybe if you drink from the waters, then you forget. Waters of Grief's Friend. That's not how you spell grief. Nope. Might rename that. Poisoning the land around them. Corvo. And then just bare bones for now. Investigate waters. Discover trapped goddess. And then, obviously in brackets, Shah. Shah. Oop. Free goddess. And then if I put an exclamation, an asterisk next to the things I need to revisit. Put it down here. Asterisk. Nope. Equals needs revisiting. Just so I don't forget in the future. Can I make that bold? I cannot. Never mind. So that's another one for Corvo. That's kind of like the personal gratification, and this is the divine aspect, which like we've had with Storm, and then this is Storm's divine thing. This is Erin's personal, Erin's divine. So that's another one for Corvo down. Yeah, that's a solo one for Corvo. Excellent. And then Apollo's is mostly solo, even though it's sort of shared with Corvo, but it's more the personal gratification of beating the necromancer who tortured him than anything else. So what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 currently. 7, 8, 9, which will take them to roughly level 16. Which gives me a few levels leeway to add in extra stuff, because I will add in extra stuff as it occurs to me. These are just the main beats for the party to explore. I think that's it for now, for this D&D prep stream anyway. Because I'm scraping the barrel creativity-wise right now for some reason. So this will obviously be on YouTube afterwards, and if you're watching this on YouTube, hi, please do swing by the stream at twitch.tv/ConradBubbles. The link is in the description below. I hope it's been useful as a kind of one actual example of me showing you how to apply what I talk about a lot in terms of writing story beats. And you'll notice that this could feasibly be anywhere. Actually, the cursor. So this one could be anywhere. This one could be anywhere. This one could be anywhere. Depends where you put Mordine's visual, really. So mostly could be slotted in anywhere. Some of them are specific because of previously established canon. But that's by the by. If you have, and obviously feel free to use any of these story beats in your own games. More than happy to answer questions about them in the YouTube comments and Twitch chat. You could email me if you wanted to. It's the same as everything else. It's comradebubbles at gmail.com. And if you do, I'm very interested in hearing how it goes for you. I'll be back next week, obviously. Possibly with doing this again, just so I've got it more formalized and in an easily editable format, rather than me just stringing together random ideas at the drop of a hat, which it works. It's my general style, but having something to fall back on is useful. Over that period. Especially when it's things like rituals with esoteric ingredients. Having the ingredients available is useful. So for now, YouTube, as I say, if you want to help me do this live, Twitch channel's in the description. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you use any of this information, if it's useful. And I guess YouTube, I'll see you when I upload the next video. So, bye YouTube.